What is going on, YouTube? It's your boy Spanko, and today I'm excited because yes, we are in Banlist season once again, and you know what that means? A Banlist prediction video. Now, if I'm going to be completely honest with you and completely transparent, I don't think this Banlist is going to change too much of the format with the release of Lightning Overdrive just being pretty new. I don't think they're going to do too much with this Banlist, but we'll get into that when the video starts. If you guys do enjoy these videos, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Yu-Gi-Oh content. We're on the road to 5K. We're at like 44 almost now, like 43.6, whatever. We're on the road to 5K. Let's make it happen. Let's get it. And so, with that being said, let's get into the video. Now, I said earlier that I don't think there's going to be too much on this ban list, and the reason I say that is because, again, with Lightning Overdrive just being released, with new products just coming out, I don't think they're going to change the format too much, especially because the format just shaped itself post Lightning Overdrive. I don't think they're going to try to reshape it right away. So with that being said, we're going to start off with the ban section, and again, it's not going to be too much, but I think there are things that should be addressed, and I'm going to start things off with Guard Dragon LP. Now, Guard Dragon LP, obviously, with the Dragon Link deck, it's very powerful. However, the only reason I think LP should go to 0 is because I feel like Konami might want to be pushing the newer products and the newer cards and getting rid of some of the older format meta relevant decks. So that's why we're starting off with LP, because again, Dragon Link hasn't gotten support in a while. It's not one of those decks that really is considered a new deck for this format. In fact, I actually think that people are getting bored of Dragon Link, even though it's still one of the best decks in the game. I think people are just getting bored of seeing it and getting bored of playing it, because I just went to a remote duel invitational, and yeah, Dragon Link came first place, and there wasn't many Dragon Link players in the tournament. I think there was actually only 2. And one of them ended up getting first place. So you can see, like, the deck is very powerful, it's just no one wants to play it. So again, I think Konami is going to want to address this. They're just going to hit LP to 0. That, or I could say Striker Dragon could go to 0. Now, I'm not going to say both of them are, obviously, but I think one or the other can go to 0. If LP goes to 0 or if Striker Dragon goes to 0, I think what Konami is going to be doing there is saying, like, here, we're going to slightly nerf your deck just so that a deck from like 3-4 formats ago that is still relevant now maybe doesn't see as much play anymore. So again, yeah, I think Dragon Link is going to get addressed in that sense. So yeah, I think LP and or Striker Dragon will do the trick. Now, for the second card in the ban section, we are going to go with Verte Anaconda. Now, I don't think this card is actually broken, and I don't think this card specifically needs to be banned because it's broken, but the reason I'm putting Verte at 0 and I'm getting it banned is because I feel like some other things can come off the list if Verte is on the list. So just hear me out when I say that. So I don't think Verte itself is broken. I don't think Dragoon is actually one of the best cards in the meta right now. Of course, Dragoon's a great card, but if you guys are looking at the meta, not every deck is just splashing Dragoon anymore. We're talking about Dino, we're talking about Tri-Brigade. Like, those are meta decks that don't play Dragoon, obviously, right? But the reason I think Verte should go to 0 is, again, because other decks and other cards can come off the list if Verte goes to 0. So I'm going to explain that when we get later into the video, but that's the only reason why I think Verte should go to 0. And yeah, when I get into the limited, semi-limited section, you guys are going to understand why I say that. And now for the third card on the list, I don't think this card's like super broken or anything, and if you guys look at the meta, it's not really doing too much right now, but I think Bish Balkan can get banned. And the only reason I say that is because I know Konami has a history of, like, when there's FDKs or these like weird hand loops and stuff like that, Konami doesn't like that and gets rid of the problem as soon as possible. So Bish Balkan is one of those things that gives a Ogdo Addict deck one of those FDK options, which they might not like and they might not be fond of. So that's the only reason I could see it going to 0. I don't think it's going to happen. It's not like it's doing anything in the meta right now, but it's just one of those things where Konami just want to address it now before it gets to become a problem. You know what I mean? So that's the only reason why I think it could go to 0. I don't think it's necessarily going to go to 0. It's just one of those things where just from the Konami's history, they like to ban stuff when it comes to FDKs and hand loops and all that kind of stuff before it becomes a problem. So yeah, again, that's why I just think Bish Balkan can go to 0. If it doesn't, it doesn't, but I'm just saying, like, it could, because Konami just might want to avoid that whole situation. Moving on to the limited section, we are starting off with Magical Meltdown to 1. Yes, I really said Magical Meltdown to 1. I actually don't think the Invoked engine is super broken or anything, but again, it's one of the things that keeps the Shaddoll Dogmatica Invoked deck alive. And Konami, again, like I said with the Dragon Link, they might want to address these older decks from like 3-4 formats ago that are still relevant today. Now, don't get me wrong, the Shaddoll deck is still very strong. Winda is still very powerful. And notice how I didn't put Winda on the ban section. I don't think Winda needs to be banned per se, but obviously Winda is a broken card. But when you hit the Meltdown and you hit some of their consistency, some of their negation, it becomes a lot harder for them to play. The deck is already susceptible to bricking, but when they don't have an Invoked engine, Shaddoll players just activate the Magical Meltdown, go through their Invoked engine, and then have like the extra cards in their hand just to hold. Whereas imagine they didn't have that invoked engine, now their hand traps or their bricks in their hand, they can't really be played, right? So it's just one of those things where I feel like it hurts the consistency. It doesn't destroy the deck per se, but it hurts the consistency where I think people are gonna stray away from playing Shaddolls and stray away from playing the old deck. Now again, that's just me speculating that Konami wants to hit these older decks to make room for the newer decks. So that's the only reason I think that's going to happen. But if they do want to go about that route and just get rid of the older decks, I just think Dragon Link needs to be addressed, and then Magical Meltdown going to 1 could be really, really good because it makes it so that the invoked engine can't just be splashed into anything anymore, and it makes a Shaddol deck a little bit more bricky. Now the next card to 1 is actually going to be very important, and this is the reason why I said Verte needs to go to 0, and that's Orchest Harp Horror. I think Orchest Harp Horror could definitely come off the ban list. It being at 1 is not going to be too broken. They also just got Scrap Raptor with Lightning Overdrive, so Orchest could get a big boost if Harp Horror goes to 1. Now I know that goes against what I was saying earlier where Konami doesn't want older decks being relevant now. However, it's a little bit different because this deck just got support as an Orchest. Like technically Scrap Raptor is really big support for Orchest. So if they want to push that, then I guess what they could do is they could bring Harp Horror back to 1. Also, if they end up making like a Scrap Raptor or something like a super rare in the next OTS, it'll help sell it as well. So that's why I mean, like, it's just one of those things where Harp Horror back to 1 could be very good for Orchest. I don't think it necessarily breaks the deck. However, if they get rid of Verte, it makes it a little bit more fair because again, Harp Horror and Verte would be crazy together. So that's why I just think if they get rid of Verte, they can make room for these other decks to get some stuff off the list. So now we're moving into the semi-limited section, and we are starting off with Infernity Archfiend. The card's still at 1. Doesn't need to be at 1 anymore in my opinion. I think putting it back at 2 would be perfectly fine. On top of that, Konami does this thing where they like to put cards from 1 to 2 to 3. They don't like to necessarily go from 1 to 3 right away. So I can see Infernity Archfiend going to 2 just for Konami to test the waters, see where it goes. And if it doesn't really do much, then they'll put it to 3. So I think Infernity Archfiend definitely doesn't need to be on the list anymore. It's just one of those cards that is just staying on the list for too long, and it just makes the list bigger than it needs to be. So yeah, I think Infernity Archfiend can definitely come back to 2. And the second card that could come back to 2 in the semi-limited section is Trickstar Light Stage for the exact same reason that I just said for Infernity Archfiend, and for the reason that I said that Verte needs to be to 0. If Verte is at 0, I feel like Trickstar Light Stage can definitely come back to 2. And again, it's one of those things where it'll go from 1 to 2 to 3 because they'll test it at 2. If it becomes too broken, they might put it back to 1. If not, they put it to 3. And that's why I think at 2 is just a perfect spot for Trickstar Light Stage. It's one of those cards that Trickstar players have been wanting to come back for ages. Trickstar is really unplayable without that card or with that card at 1, to be honest with you. So Trickstar Light Stage at 2 would be huge for the deck. And I think it's one of those things where it makes rogue players and people who just want to play those fun decks a lot more happy with Light Stage being back at 2. But again, Verte needs to be banned for this to happen, and that's what I mean by the reason I put Verte at 0. It had to happen for this to come back. Now, if Verte doesn't go to 0, then this won't happen. That's what I'm just kind of trying to make the correlation. It's one of those things where Light Stage itself is a 1-card Verte Anaconda in pretty much any deck because you can splash the Trickstar engine as like a small little engine. So that's why it's kind of one of those things where if Verte is around, I don't think Light Stage can come back. But if Verte is at 0, Light Stage can definitely come back to 2. Okay, lastly for the unlimited section, we're going to start off with Called by the Grave. This card definitely needs to come back to 3. Unless Konami gives us Crossout Designator as soon as possible. The only reason I thought Called by the Grave went to 1 originally was because I thought Konami was going to release Crossout Designator and then try to sell it to us. And the only way to sell it to us is to get Called by the Grave to 1, right? I understand that logic, so I thought they were going to go with that. But they put Called by the Grave to 1 a long time ago. We have no signs of Crossout Designator coming out just yet. At least at the time that I'm recording this video, we have no signs of Crossout Designator coming out just yet. And there's no reason for Called by the Grave to be at 1. The thing is, I'm going to be honest with you, if you guys haven't noticed, a lot of the meta today is really dominated by hand traps. Like, Droll Unlock is just a turn-ending card for Drytron in a lot of situations. Lancia is just a turn-ending card against Tri-Brigade. Against Dino, it can be a turn-ending card. That's why it's like one of those things where hand traps right now really do rule the format. Ghost Spell is a great card right now in the format. So it's just one of those things where I don't think turn-ending cards should be in the format. For anyone who thinks Maxi should be banned, I personally think Maxi should be at 3 anyways, but for anyone who thinks Maxi should be banned, it's kind of like one of those situations where people think Maxi is like a turn-ending card. Well, Droll Lockbird can be a turn-ending card in today's format. Lancia can be a turn-ending card in today's format. And that's why I think Called by the Grave should definitely go to 3 because, again, Hand traps are really ruling this format, and it's pretty much whoever sees their hand traps first is gonna win. I noticed that at the most recent events that I played at, when you see the hand traps that win you that specific matchup, you just completely win, because it's just so significant and so hardcore, and it's so hard for people to play through some of these big hand traps nowadays, especially with the meta decks in the format right now. So that's why I just think Call by the Grave should definitely be at 3. And then next at Unlimited, I think Dynamite Knight, the True Draco Fighter, should definitely come back to 3. I think the name is True Draco Fighter, but I think that card should definitely come back to 3, because every time Konami releases True Draco stuff off the ban list, the deck really doesn't do anything. Again, without Diagram at 3, without Masterpiece around, the deck really struggles. And also you have to think about like cards, like Card of Demise was very popular in that deck. That card's at 1. So it's one of those things where that deck is just not so powerful at all anymore, and I think Dynamite Knight doesn't need to be on the ban list anymore. So that's why I think it should definitely come off. Again, I don't think that's one of those things that does anything to the format, doesn't even do anything relevant for True Draco. I just want to get it off the ban list because I just feel like the ban list is too long. There's things on it that shouldn't be on it, and I think that's one of those cards that shouldn't be on it. Lastly, I'm going to say this. I think something in Pendulum needs to get unlimited. It needs to come off the ban list completely. I definitely think like either Skull Crobat Joker or what is it? Double Iris, I think is at 1. One of them is at 1. Astrograph is banned, I believe. Something in Pendulum needs to come off the ban list. There's no reason all these Pendulum cards are on the ban list. Like Skull Crobat Joker is just going to be one that I mentioned, and the reason I say that is because every deck now essentially has a normal summon that can Rhoda, right? That's essentially what Joker is. You normal summon it, you search a scale. Like that's not anything special. Every single deck in the format, every single deck in the game can pretty much do that. So Pendulum not being able to have that, I think is just a little bit dumb. So I think Skull Crobat Joker come off the list. You guys can argue Astrograph, you guys can argue Double Iris, you guys can argue all those other Pendulum cards. I just think something in Pendulum needs to come off the list because there's just too much on the list that doesn't need to be there. So thank you guys all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's ban list prediction video. Again, if you guys have any ideas or any suggestions, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think needs to be banned and why it needs to be banned. I think this list is very fair. I don't think it changes the format up too much. I just don't think Konami wants to change up the format right after Lightning Overdrive, especially because the format just shaped itself. So that's why I just don't think they're going to do something too crazy with the ban list. But again, that's just my ideas. That's why I think. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you guys enjoyed today's video. Thank you guys all for watching. And with that, Spanko signing out. Peace. G-A is